A while back, a business owner almost lost $2.4 million because he believed what the buyer told him. It is a fate I see all too often, and this seller was right in the clutches of a very common and a very dark buyer strategy. So how did this happen? Well, in this video, I am going to show you exactly how this happens and open up a little bit of the secret playbook of potentially some nefarious buyers that could cost you some serious money when you go to sell your business. All right, first, let's give you some context on this seller. So little clickbaity, it's not exactly $2.3 million or $2.1 million that he lost, but it was pretty close. You'll see what I mean. So we had this seller. He wasn't on our marketplace, but he was getting hit up by private equity types through email. And this is something very, very common. In fact, now we do cold email too, because it's so common that sellers are getting hit up by private equity people who do not represent them, that we have decided to throw our hat in the ring and also do cold email to tell them like, hey, we're not like the other guys. We actually represent you. Let's get you the biggest, best deal possible. But at this time, we weren't doing that. So this seller got this offer for $1.3 million, and the buyer told him, don't even go and check out those different brokers, because all they're going to do is increase the price to cover their commission, and you'll get the same amount of money I am offering you, but it's going to take way longer. And you need to make a decision right now. This is a very common thing. Luckily, that seller did not do exactly what that buyer told him to do, and we took that business and we sold it for over $2.1 million. Sorry, I know I said 2.4 earlier, that was a mistake. Sorry, $2.1 million over the initial list price, which was over the initial list price that we actually had. And that is something business buyers do not like about people like me. They don't like brokers because we create competition, which you as a seller should absolutely love, because that is how you get into bidding wars that can get you the most amount of money when it comes to selling your business. So let's talk about this playbook. What are some of the red flags that pop up here that could cost you literally a seven-figure exit? I mean, in this case, it literally almost cost this guy over $1 million to listen to this buyer. So let's break down how this playbook works and why it's so effective on sellers, why sellers keep falling for this again and again and again. So the first thing to realize, everything is psychology, right? Most of you who are in my audience do some kind of form of marketing for your business, like probably your core skill set is marketing in some shape or form. So you should realize like, hey, selling anything, buying anything is all based on emotion. No one buys anything, including $1 million businesses, without having an emotional need first. So what the buyer is doing here, they're trying to get you to buy into them, in that they're creating FOMO for you. They're telling you, hey, I need a decision now. I think in this case, he gave the seller like less than a week to decide, like, hey, we're moving quick. We only have this amount of funds and we're talking to X amount of deals. So it creates all this artificial, and maybe it was true, but a lot of times it's not, artificial urgency for this seller. And what do we know about urgency? If someone thinks that a deal is going to close, the fear of loss is often much more powerful than the fear of gain. So in this case, the seller is thinking, oh my God, I might lose $1.3 million if I don't do this right now. I need to act right now. Now, fortunately, this seller had a better head on their shoulder where the urgency tactic did not work on them. But I have seen seller after seller fall for this because of the artificial urgency that a buyer creates. So some of the other psychological tricks that a buyer uses here outside of just urgency is something that they also told this seller, like, hey, don't even bother going to a broker. They're going to give you the exact same price as me, just adding their commission on top, because that's how they get paid. I'm giving you a fair market valuation for your business. Now, what is a fair market valuation? Well, it's whatever someone is willing to pay. So there is countless different types of valuation models. There's profit, there's revenue multiples, there's pre-revenue models, there's seed fund round models, there's discounted cash flow models. There's all kinds of different models. And like I know people who have personally bought businesses for $0, including no financing, and they just took over the business, but the way the deal structure was still beneficial for the seller in the end. So like there is a million different ways to value something, right? This buyer does not have a monopoly on what a fair market valuation is. And that's that's very important for you as a seller to recognize here. So when it comes to the broker thing, I think it's the best way to show this is another story. I had a friend, a much smaller business than the one we started this video with. He sold his business for, I think it was like $218,000. He sends me a message on Facebook, says like, "Hey, sorry man, I just didn't want to pay you guys the 15% commission." And I told him like, "Buddy, you lost out on like an extra 100 grand. It was something like that, because even with our commission, with the business that you sold, you way undervalued it. This was like a $500,000 business, and you missed out on an additional 6 figures that you would have gotten in your pocket. And that's including after you took out our commission. You got sold by the buyer." This is very, very common. As you can tell, I have tons of stories like this. But again, this is all part of the psychology of what they're trying to do, of building tension with you. You gotta act now. You're not going to get a better deal. They're trying to shut you off from competition coming in, because the buyer knows if competition comes in, they're going to have to pay you a much more serious multiple, right? So we don't want that to happen. So let's look at some common phrases here that a buyer might use that can kind of like tingle your spider senses, if you will, that, oh shit, they might be doing this tactic on me, right, to try to get me to sell for a much lower price than I should. So some common phrases that will add either urgency or scarcity, things like the market is turning. We see some risks here. That's a very famous one, because there's always risk. There's always going to be a risk that they see. That's business, right? Our investors are concerned about, well, investors are always concerned. They want their money back, right? So that's always going to be true no matter how good or bad your business is. But these are just some of phrases that they're going to be using on you when it comes to this dark buyer strategy. So walking back to the seller that I talked about at the beginning of this video. So before that seller reached out to us, that buyer offered them a $1.3 million deal. So that wasn't all up front though. I believe they were going to pay them like 800 grand up front and the last $400,000 over a period of a year. Now remember, the buyer told the seller, like, you will not get a better valuation if you go with a broker. Luckily, the seller did not let his FOMO and the urgency affect him, and he reached out to our vetting team. He submitted his business with us, and he literally said like, "Hey, look, I already have a buyer. I just want to see what you guys think. I trust you guys in the space. Tell me, am I out to lunch or is this right?" And so we did. We do this all the time. People don't realize, like, even if you don't use us, you should definitely still use our vetting department, because we will do this because often we know that the buyer is lowballing you, right? So we have well, of course we'll give you a free valuation because it's probably better than the offer you're actually getting from the buyer, right? So we do the vetting. We tell them like, "Oh no, your business is not worth 1.3 million. Your business is actually worth closer to $1.8 million. So he's like, "Oh, okay. Well, let's list with you guys and see what happens. If that buyer if I miss that buyer opportunity, oh well, I think there's other things, other people I can sell it to." And we agreed. So we ended up listing the business for 1.8 million. It created a massive buyer competition because he had a very high quality business that was growing, and year over year, very steady numbers. And he didn't end up getting 1.8 million. No, he ended up selling the business for over what we listed it for $2.1 million, and he got $1.8 million up front. Now think about that. If he had listened to that buyer, he would have gotten less amount of money for the total sales price of his business than what he got up front by using a broker that represents him. That's a pretty crazy difference. So that seller, if you take away all of the commission that he paid us, it was right around $217,000 that seller paid us. Now, some of you are scoffing like, I would never pay 200 grand, over 200 grand for you guys to do that. Well, still, listen, he got $1.8 million, almost $1.9 million in his pocket after he paid our fees. So he got an additional $800,000 by using a broker instead of listening to a buyer that is giving him this artificial scarcity, right? So this is what I mean when it comes to like how a buyer manipulates you, it's such a easy line for them to say, like, why would you give away such a large amount of your business to a broker? And that sounds very seductive. Like, why would I? And I should probably move fast because it sounds like you're running out of money, right? Like, let's get this deal done today, right? And this is music to the buyer's ears, and it's very, very seductive if you don't know what you don't know. So let's talk a little bit more about a framework you can use here for spotting some more of these manipulation attempts. So I like to call it the 3R red flag system. That is, the buyer's trying to rush you, time concerns, right? Repetition, they bring up the same thing in different ways, like, oh, there's risk, the market is turning, the investors are concerned about X, Y, and Z. They're trying to wear you down. And then relativity. This is where constant comparisons to similar deals that they have done, like, oh, well, I bought an e-commerce business in this space, but it was only worth this much, but it was doing this much net profit. Now, that may be a real true story, because again, they like to buy businesses that don't have competition. So that seller probably didn't get as much as they were worth either, which is why they're bringing it up to you. And they're trying to get you to accept an even lower amount by comparing a past deal that they did. So you anchor that price in your head is another psychological trick. And during due diligence, this is often one of the things that makes me probably the most annoyed. Is I get hit up all the time by people saying, like, oh, look, this buyer's offering me 5-6x via email. You guys are only giving me 3.5x. I'm going to go with them. Like, what that seller in that situation doesn't realize is that cold email that they sent with that kind of offer is not the offer. That's just to get you to sign a letter of intent, an LOI. Then they wear you down afterwards, like sudden discoveries that they found out right before the due diligence period ends. They do all sorts of different things, of all the different emergency calls about the market conditions to wear you down to where you'll probably end up selling for less than 3.5x that my team probably could have got you for. So these are all things for you to watch out when it comes to buyers hitting you up. Remember, a buyer never wants you to use a broker. Like, buyers will use brokers, of course. A good deal is a good deal, so they will if they have to, but they prefer not to. At least the savvy buyers don't. So with that said, for you, the best thing you can do if you want to sell your business for the absolute most is either use a broker that you trust or understand how buyer tactics can actually rob you of the amount of money you deserve. Now, speaking of money, if you want to make some money, whether you buy or sell a business with me, whether you do that or not, go ahead and click the next video where I talk about our referral program and how I can pay you some extra money just by you referring a friend to me.